The string quartet was deep into their elegant rendition of Vivaldi when the wedding doors burst open like Judgment Day itself. Every head turned toward the blinding light spilling through the entrance, the delicate hum of violins collapsing into silence. The groom, Rufino Milanesi, the man who once owned fear like currency, froze mid-breath. The air thickened around him, a frozen storm of champagne bubbles and whispers. At the far end of the aisle stood a small girl in a bright pink dress, her bow perfectly crooked, her eyes wide with something that was not fear but purpose. Martha's tiny hand clutched a blue spray canister, trembling but determined, the mist already visible in the sunlight. The scent of flowers, roses, and lilies arranged in giant crystal vases, mixed with the faint metallic edge of tension. The bride gasped, her white gown shimmering under chandeliers that suddenly felt too bright. The bodyguards stepped forward instinctively, their muscles tensing under black shirts. But Rufino lifted one tattooed hand slightly, halting them with a single word. Before we continue, could you like the video, subscribe to my channel, and tell us how long you've been here in the comments? Thank you. Wait, he said, voice low, carrying across the marble. The word struck every corner of the hall like a commandment, and even the flowers seemed to lean in. Martha took 2 steps forward, her sneakers squeaking faintly against the polished floor. The canister trembled in her grip, but she didn't lower it. "Are you Rufino Milanesi?" she asked, her voice small but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Rufino blinked, unsure whether to laugh or disarm, but his instincts told him this was not theater. Around them, the grand hall shimmered with luxury, cream drapes, golden chairs, ivory linens untouched by panic yet stained by suspicion. The scent of expensive perfume clashed with the smell of adrenaline. His bride reached for his arm, whispering his name, but he didn't turn to her. Instead, his gaze locked onto the child. "Who are you?" he asked finally. Martha's voice cracked but didn't falter. "You're my dad," she said, and then squeezed the trigger. A white cloud of pepper spray hit Rufino square in the face before anyone could move. Chaos followed instantly, the quartet's instruments crashing to the ground as the guards lunged forward. Rufino staggered back, eyes burning, vision flooding with fire and disbelief. He didn't scream. He only raised his arm to shield himself, a soundless snarl cutting through the confusion. The bride shrieked, her veil whipping as she stumbled away from the scent of chemicals and shattered grace. "Don't hurt her." Rufino rasped through the pain, pushing one guard aside even as tears streaked his face. The guests scrambled, chairs clattering like dominoes as Martha dropped the canister and backed toward the aisle. Her chest heaved, and though her hands shook, her stare didn't break. "You left my mom," she said between sobs. "You promised you'd come back." The guards froze at Rufino's signal, though their instincts screamed otherwise. His eyes, red and streaming, searched through the blur for her shape, for that small, stubborn face that carried too much history for 7 years. "Your mom," he coughed, voice graveled by pain and memory. "What's her name?" Martha's lips trembled. "Lucia," she said softly, as though saying it too loud would shatter the world. The name hit Rufino harder than the spray, a ghost's whisper carrying 10 years of silence. Lucia. The woman he had loved before his empire consumed him, before bloodlines mattered more than promises. The woman who vanished the night his rivals turned his heart into collateral. "She's sick," Martha said, her tears catching the light like glass. "She told me to find you before she dies." Rufino took a single step forward. Martha flinched, her whole body tightening like a cornered kitten. The guards waited for his next command, their hands ready but uncertain. Rufino's bride, pale and trembling, whispered for the police, but her voice was drowned by the echoing quiet. "Why would she send you here?" Rufino asked, his tone quieter now, like speaking to a ghost rather than a child. "Because she said you'd remember," Martha whispered. "She said you'd recognize me." Her words felt too heavy for her size, but they carried like confession. The girl's eyes shimmered with defiance, the same gray-green that Lucia's had. Rufino saw it now, the shape of her mouth, the stubborn arch of her brow, all haunting reflections of a love he had buried under power. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, though it sounded like he was talking to himself. Martha's small fists balled. "Neither should you," she said. "Not with her." The room gasped collectively, scandal finding oxygen. Rufino's bride stepped back as if burned, her voice trembling. "What is this?" she hissed, but Rufino barely heard her. The sound of security radios crackled faintly in the background, but no one moved without his signal. Martha's dress fluttered as the air conditioning hummed back to life, the spray sting still hanging faintly in the air. "Your mother is still alive?" Rufino asked again, like the sentence itself might rewrite fate. "Barely," Martha said, her chin lifting. "And she said I had to find you before the man with the scar does." Rufino's heart stopped mid-beat. The man with the scar. His world tightened into focus, every thread of the past pulling taut. "Who told you that?" he asked, his voice now colder, darker. "She did," Martha said simply. "Before he came back for her." For a long moment, the world around them was made only of silence and truth. Rufino lowered his hand slowly, blinking through the pepper burn, eyes finally clear enough to see her properly. Her bow was crooked, her cheeks streaked with tears, but her stare was steel. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said. "I wasn't alone," she replied softly. "Someone followed me here." The words fell like lead, and Rufino's pulse turned to static. The guards glanced toward the doors, instinctive dread creeping into their postures. "Seal the building," Rufino ordered. His bride's protest was swallowed by the sound of bolts locking and men moving. Martha watched him closely, confusion flickering under her courage. "You believe me," she said. "You didn't even ask for proof." Rufino's jaw clenched. "I don't need proof," he said. "Just time." The ballroom, once a temple of roses and chandeliers, now pulsed with invisible tension. The guests had been herded into the outer courtyard, their murmurs drifting like faint echoes of disbelief through the arched doors. Rufino stood at the center of the chaos he used to command with ease, but this was a storm that didn't answer to him. His guards spread through the perimeter, their earpieces buzzing with low, clipped instructions. Martha, still trembling, clutched her empty canister like a relic of defiance. The bride sat near the altar, her veil discarded, fury and humiliation fighting for dominance in her eyes. Rufino didn't look at her. He couldn't afford to. His world had just bent in a way that power couldn't unbend. He blinked away the sting, his pupils dilated, his heart remembering the sound of Lucia's laughter 10 years ago. "Find the security feed," he ordered finally. "I want to see who walked her in." 2 guards dashed toward the control room, their heavy boots echoing down the marble corridor. Martha stood still, but her breathing was uneven, the adrenaline fading into a small tremor that ran through her arms. Rufino glanced at her again, softer this time, as though trying to translate her existence into logic. "You said someone followed you," he repeated, his tone quiet now, deliberate. "Did you see who?" She nodded, her expression solemn, her small voice brittle as glass. "A man with a scar under his eye," she whispered. "He was outside the church. I saw him watching the cars." The air tightened immediately, his guards exchanging looks that carried years of recognition. Rufino didn't answer at first, only walked toward her slowly. "That man doesn't follow," he said finally. "He hunts." The words fell cold, but Martha didn't flinch. Her fingers dug into the canister, the only weapon she'd ever held, and her small chin lifted again in defiance. "Then you know him," she said. Rufino's eyes darkened, memories slithering out from beneath the weight of his polished exterior. "Once," he said, "before he chose to betray me." The bride's voice sliced through the tension like broken glass. "This is insane," she cried, standing abruptly. "You're letting a child with mace and a story ruin our wedding?" Rufino didn't turn. "Our wedding was already ruined the moment you walked into it for politics, not love." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with unspoken truths. Martha's gaze flicked between them, her innocence warring with confusion. She didn't know yet that love and crime shared the same vocabulary in his world. The security feed flickered to life on the ballroom's mounted screen, black and white footage of the church's exterior rolling like a slow confession. Rufino stepped closer, watching as the replay showed Martha walking up the steps alone, her pink dress too bright for the grayscale world. Seconds later, a shadow emerged from behind a white limousine, a tall man in a coat, face obscured but unmistakable. The scar was visible even through the distortion. He lingered, then vanished when the doors opened. "Freeze it," Rufino said. His voice had changed again, clipped and dangerous. "That's him," he whispered. "Johnny Morello." The name fell like a curse. His men stiffened, the recognition instantaneous. Martha looked up at him. "You know him? He used to be my brother," Rufino said. "Until he started selling children for secrets." The words landed heavy enough to make Martha's breath catch. "Children," she repeated, the word tasting wrong in her mouth. Rufino turned away, his hand pressed his temple like he could squeeze out the ghosts crowding his head. "Your mother got too close to his business. She found out what he was moving behind my back, what he was doing with the money I gave him." He paced as he spoke, the cold composure of a man reliving old fire. "When she threatened to tell me, he made sure she disappeared. I thought she left on her own." Martha's eyes widened, her small face tightening with confusion. "She said she left to keep me safe," she whispered. "She did," Rufino said softly, "and she was right." His reflection stared back at him in the mirrored wall. Rufino Milanesi, the groom who built an empire on control, suddenly powerless before a child who carried his face in miniature. A guard burst into the room, his breath ragged. "Boss, we found a phone under the pew near the front entrance," he said. "GPS tracker active." Someone was marking her location in real time. Rufino didn't react immediately. He'd seen traps like this before, too clean, too bold, too public. "Wipe it," he said. "Then get my car ready. We're leaving." The bride stood again, furious. "You're not serious. The ceremony isn't even over." "It was over when the truth walked through the door," Rufino replied. His tone didn't rise, but it ended the argument. Martha took a step closer, uncertain. "Where are we going?" she asked. "To your mother," he said, as though saying it could undo the past. "She's not safe anymore." The little girl hesitated, her small voice almost lost in the cavernous room. "Neither are you." Outside, the storm had begun, a sudden curtain of rain washing over the marble steps like absolution. The guards moved with precision, clearing the way as Rufino led Martha through the chaos of overturned flowers and wet silk. His tuxedo jacket was soaked before they even reached the door, but he didn't notice. The city smelled of rain and gasoline, a scent he used to associate with beginnings, not regrets. Martha clutched his hand tighter than he expected, her grip anchoring him to something he hadn't felt in years. "You don't have to protect me," she said softly. "You just have to listen." Rufino didn't reply, but the faintest trace of a smile flickered under the rain. "You sound like her," he said finally. "Lucia never asked for anything except honesty." Martha looked up at him, her eyes bright even through the downpour. "Then tell me," she said. "Did you ever love her?" Rufino's silence was his only answer, but it was louder than any confession. The car ride was quiet, except for the hum of rain against the windows and the steady rhythm of Rufino's thoughts. His driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror, uneasy, the pistol holstered at his thigh. Martha sat beside him, staring at the dark city rolling by, her small reflection ghosted against his own. "How far is she?" Rufino asked finally. 2 miles, Martha said, almost whispering. "She's at St. Gabriel's clinic." Rufino nodded, though his pulse tightened with dread. "You said the man with the scar was watching. He'll know where she is." Martha's voice was small but steady. "She said if I got to you, you'd know what to do." Rufino exhaled, rubbing his face, the pepper sting long gone, but the ache deeper now. "I used to," he muttered. "Before love made me forget how to fight clean." The car rolled through puddles that reflected the city's crooked light, and for the first time in years, Rufino wasn't sure if he was heading toward salvation or a trap. The car stopped 2 blocks from the clinic, its headlights dimmed under the rain's silver sheet. Rufino scanned the street through the tinted glass, his instincts mapping the scene like a chessboard of risk and opportunity. The hospital loomed ahead, smaller than he remembered, its pale walls bruised by shadow and neglect. "Stay in the car," he told Martha, his voice low but firm. She shook her head instantly, clutching the hem of her pink dress like a flag of refusal. "You can't leave me," she said. "He might already be here." Rufino turned his head toward her, and though his tone stayed sharp, his eyes softened. "That's exactly why I can't let you walk into a trap." She stared at him, the defiance flickering between trust and fear. "You don't get to tell me what's safe," she said. "You left us once already." The driver shifted uncomfortably in the front seat, pretending not to listen. Rufino's jaw flexed, a muscle twitching near his temple as the girl's words cut through his composure. He leaned forward slightly, his tattoos catching the light from a passing car. "You have no idea what I left behind," he said quietly. "Your mother wanted you far away from this life." Martha's voice cracked, but she didn't look away. "And yet I'm here anyway." The rain grew heavier, drumming against the roof in rhythm with his heartbeat. "You're your mother's child," Rufino muttered, almost to himself. "She never learned how to stay out of fire either." "Maybe she was waiting for someone to walk through it with her," Martha said. The line hung between them like smoke, uninvited but impossible to ignore. Rufino opened the door, the storm's wind rushing in like a warning. The streetlights flickered, reflecting off puddles that mirrored the hospital's tired facade. Two guards stepped out from the trailing car, their black jackets blending into the night. "Keep your eyes on every window," Rufino ordered. "Johnny doesn't make mistakes." One guard nodded, pulling a silenced pistol from his waistband. Martha pressed her hands against the window, her face pale in the blur of rain. "Please," she whispered, though he couldn't hear her. Rufino crossed the street, the puddles splashing around his shoes like small detonations. Every movement felt rehearsed from another life, one where instinct was gospel. He reached the hospital doors, the neon sign above flickering between life and exhaustion. Somewhere inside, Lucia's name was written on a chart that might already be redacted. The nurse at the reception desk looked up, startled, as Rufino entered. His presence was dissonant against the sterile glow of the corridor, tattooed hands, wet suit, eyes that spoke fluent violence. "Lucia Ferry," he said, voice calm but unyielding. "Room number." The nurse hesitated, her fingers frozen above the keyboard. "Family only," she managed. Rufino leaned forward slightly. "That's exactly what I am." She swallowed, the sound audible even over the hum of fluorescent lights, and typed. "Room 12, second floor," but Rufino was already gone before the warning left her lips. He moved like a shadow wrapped in purpose, every step measured, every door a potential ambush. He reached the staircase, gun drawn now, his reflection flickering in the polished rail. For the first time in years, fear didn't belong to him. It belonged to what he might find. When he entered the room, time stuttered. Lucia lay pale against the white sheets, and force snaking into her arm like a fragile thread holding her to the world. Her face was thinner, her hair streaked with silver, but her presence filled the air like a forgotten melody. Rufino froze in the doorway, unable to breathe for several seconds. "I was wondering when you'd come," she whispered without opening her eyes. His throat closed. "You knew." She nodded faintly. "Martha found you, didn't she?" "You sent her," he said, stepping closer. "You let her walk into danger." Her eyelids fluttered open then, revealing eyes that hadn't changed, sharp and sorrowful all at once. "You think she walked into danger," she said softly. "She walked into her father." Rufino sank into the chair beside her bed, the leather creaking beneath his weight. "Johnny's been watching," he said, every word heavy with regret. "He followed her to the wedding." Lucia smiled faintly, though it was more pain than warmth. "Of course he did. He's always been jealous of what you build." "He's not jealous," Rufino said. "He's vengeful." The sound of thunder rolled through the windows, rattling the glass like an omen. "He wants what you took," Lucia murmured. Rufino frowned. "What did I take?" "Not money," she whispered. "The chance to be human again." Her hand trembled as it reached for his. "He sold that part of himself long before you did." The line cut deep, and Rufino found himself unable to respond. A sharp knock broke the moment, quick and precise, 3 taps spaced by silence. Rufino's body reacted before thought, gun raised toward the door. "Who is it?" he barked. A muffled voice answered. "It's me," Martha called softly. Rufino's chest eased slightly as he crossed the room and cracked the door open. The hallway behind her was empty, though rain pooled near her shoes. "I told you to stay in the car," he said, more weary than angry. "I got scared," she admitted. "The driver said someone cut the tires." Rufino's blood went cold. "Get inside," he ordered, slamming the door shut behind her. He pulled the curtain aside and saw it, a figure standing beneath the hospital sign, looking up. A scar glinted under the streetlight like a signature carved in hate. Johnny Morello hadn't aged the way Rufino had. He'd curdled instead of matured. Even through the rain-blurred glass, Rufino recognized the posture, the arrogance of a man who believed fear was inheritance. "He's here," Rufino said. Lucia's voice didn't tremble. "Then finish what he started years ago." "This isn't about revenge," Rufino growled. "It's about closing the circle," she countered. Martha stood between them, her small body radiating the kind of bravery adults often forget. "If you go out there, he'll kill you," she said. "Then he'll come for her." Rufino holstered his gun, turning to Lucia. "Can you walk?" She shook her head. "Then you protect her," he said to Martha. "No matter what happens, you stay behind that door until I come back." The little girl swallowed hard, but nodded once. Rufino stepped into the corridor again, every instinct in him sharpening to a blade. The lights flickered once, and for a second, the hallway looked like a photograph of the past: blood, betrayal, brothers turned wolves. He pushed through the hospital's front doors and into the storm. Johnny stood by the edge of the streetlight, his suit darker than the night around him. Still dressing like a saint at funerals, Johnny sneered. "You've got one last chance," Rufino said, his voice flat. "Leave them out of this." "Them?" Johnny laughed, the sound slicing through the rain. "You don't get to say them. You forfeited family the moment you chose empire." Rufino's grip tightened around the pistol. "Family chose me back tonight," he said. The storm crackled as thunder answered, and two brothers faced each other on the edge of redemption and ruin. The street felt smaller than it was, the air compressed by rain and the memory of old blood. Rufino and Johnny stood separated by 10 paces and a lifetime, each reflecting the other's ruin under the halo of a flickering streetlight. "You shouldn't have brought her here," Johnny said, voice slick with contempt. Rufino didn't answer immediately. He just watched the man he'd once called brother flick a cigarette into the gutter. "You were always brave with words," Rufino said finally, his tone calm but edged like broken glass. "Still hiding behind borrowed soldiers?" "They're not borrowed anymore," Johnny replied with a smirk. "You trained them and I bought them, seems fair." The sound of rain hitting asphalt filled the silence between them, a slow percussion counting down something inevitable. Rufino took one step forward, his black shoes leaving faint ripples in the puddle. "This isn't business," he said. "This is blood." Johnny's smile faltered slightly, though the arrogance remained stitched into his voice. "Blood," he echoed. "Don't talk to me about blood, brother. You turned yours into an investment the day you traded love for power." Rufino's jaw tensed, but his hand didn't rise to the pistol. "You think power killed Lucia?" he said. "No. Your greed did." Johnny's expression changed, the smirk fading into something darker, bitterer. "She was mine before she was ever yours," he hissed. "You took her, just like you took everything else that mattered." Rufino stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair, the thunder rolling like an old god waking. "She chose to leave you," he said quietly. "And she came to me because you were already lost." Johnny's laugh came out cracked, a sound born from hate that had nowhere else to go. "You always did believe in stories that made you the hero." Inside the hospital room, Martha pressed her ear against the door, every instinct screaming not to. Lucia's breath was shallow but steady, her hand weakly gripping the blanket. "He's outside, isn't he?" she whispered. Martha nodded, though she wasn't sure her mother could see the movement in the dim light. "You can't let him fight alone," Lucia murmured. "He won't come back if he thinks it ends with him." Martha's throat tightened. "He told me to stay." Lucia smiled faintly. "He told me that once too." The rain outside seemed to grow louder, almost rhythmic, like the city itself was waiting. Martha turned back to her mother, her small face caught between defiance and desperation. "If I go," she said, "will you be okay?" Lucia closed her eyes. "If you go," she whispered, "you'll remind him why he's still alive." Rufino's hand finally moved, slow and deliberate, drawing the gun he had no desire to use. Johnny mirrored him instantly, the old synchronization between them returning like a cruel echo. "You're predictable," Johnny sneered. "Still waiting for honor to save you." Rufino didn't reply. He'd learned long ago that words were traps Johnny built better than bullets. "You're not walking away from this," Rufino said. "Neither are you," Johnny answered. Lightning flashed, and in that fraction of white light, both men saw what they had become, two reflections of the same sin. Rufino's finger tightened, but something stopped him. A small voice carried across the rain, trembling but unmistakable. "Stop." Both men turned toward the sound, disbelief slicing through instinct. Martha stood on the steps of the clinic, her dress plastered to her legs, her eyes too bright for the dark. "Martha," Rufino said, his tone breaking like an unarmored thing. She didn't move closer, but she didn't hide either. "If you shoot him," she said, her voice steady, "then he wins." Johnny laughed softly, but there was no joy in it. "Out of the mouths of babes," he muttered, lowering his gun slightly. Rufino's heartbeat roared in his ears, louder than the rain. "Go inside," he ordered, but Martha shook her head. "You said family chose you back tonight," she said. "Then act like it." The words hung between them, soft and impossible to argue with. Johnny's smirk faltered, his eyes flickering to the girl, then to the hospital window, where Lucia's silhouette trembled faintly in the light. "So that's her," he said quietly. "The reason you're suddenly pretending to have a soul." Rufino took another step forward, the barrel of his gun lowering by degrees. "She's the reason I remember what one feels like," he said. "And she's not yours to threaten." Johnny exhaled through his nose, anger giving way to something colder, strategy. "You don't get it," he said. "I never needed to threaten her. The world you built already did." Rufino blinked, confused, then realization slid in like a knife. "You used my name," he said. "You used my network." Johnny's silence was confession enough. "Those homes you funded, the charities, the adoptions, they weren't clean," Johnny continued. "They were pipelines." Rufino's stomach turned, memory flashing to contracts he'd signed without reading, donations he'd made to erase guilt. "You turned my repentance into trafficking," he whispered. "You always made it so easy," Johnny said, smiling thinly. "All that wealth and guilt in one place, it was art." Before Rufino could answer, the sharp click of a safety echoed behind them. A third presence stepped from the alley, dressed in hospital scrubs, but the eyes were military cold. "Police," the newcomer said, flashing a badge that glinted under the rain. Rufino didn't lower his weapon. "Which division?" "Doesn't matter," the man said. "What matters is you both come quietly." Johnny chuckled. "You think either of us walk quietly anywhere?" "Johnny Morello," the officer said, shifting his stance. "You're under arrest for federal kidnapping, trafficking, and Johnny fired first." The bullet caught the officer in the shoulder, spinning him backward, his badge falling into the puddle. Rufino's reflexes lit instantly, 2 shots answering, shattering the night. The officer collapsed, but Johnny was already gone, vanishing into the dark like smoke with a name. Martha screamed, the sound ripping through the rain as Rufino ran toward her. He reached her before she could fall, wrapping his arms around her small shaking frame. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of everything. "You told me to protect her," she sobbed. "That's what I was doing." He looked back toward the alley where Johnny had disappeared, the blood from the wounded officer already washing away in the storm. "We need to move," he said, pulling her close. "He'll come back, and next time, he won't miss." Martha looked up at him, her face pale but fierce. "Then you'll stop him," she said, almost daring him to deny it. Rufino didn't promise, but he didn't look away. Behind them, the faint wail of sirens began to build, slicing through the city like an approaching reckoning. Somewhere inside, Lucia's monitors beeped in fragile rhythm, marking every second they didn't have. Rufino didn't wait for the sirens to reach the hospital. He was already moving before their echoes turned into light. He scooped Martha into his arms, the rain making her light as a shadow, and sprinted toward the side exit where the guards had regrouped. "We're leaving," he barked, voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. One of the men nodded, opening the black sedan with a gloved hand, scanning the alley before stepping aside. "Lucia?" the guard asked, glancing toward the glowing windows above them. Rufino hesitated for half a heartbeat, the weight of choice pressing down. "We can't move her yet," he said. "She's too weak." Martha twisted in his arms, her face pale and wet. "We can't leave her," she said. "If he comes back, he won't get near her," Rufino interrupted. "Not while I'm still breathing." The car door slammed, the tires hissed against water, and the city swallowed them whole. The sedan raced through the narrow streets of Palermo's industrial district, where the rain turned everything into reflections of ghosts. Rufino stared through the windshield, every light looking like a memory of a life he'd buried. "Where are we going?" Martha asked, her voice small, vibrating against the hum of the engine. "Safe house," Rufino replied. "One Johnny doesn't know." He checked his pistol, then the rearview mirror, his instincts too disciplined to rest. The guards in the trailing vehicle radioed updates every few blocks, no pursuit yet, but Rufino knew his brother never played short games. Martha leaned closer to the window, tracing the blurred lights with her finger. "He looked like you," she said suddenly. Rufino's chest tightened. "He used to be," he answered. Then he decided to trade family for profit. The car turned sharply, heading toward the old harbor, where salt and oil mixed like the scent of old sins. They reached a warehouse disguised as ruin, its broken windows hiding reinforced steel and silence. Rufino carried Martha inside, where the air was warmer and smelled faintly of cedar and gun oil. The lights flicked on automatically, revealing a room lined with crates, maps, and the ghosts of every operation he'd sworn to forget. "You lived here?" she asked, her small hand brushing a stack of files. "Once," he said. "Before I built walls instead of homes." She sat on a bench, watching as he locked the door with 3 bolts and a biometric scan. "You still know how to do this," she said quietly. "It's muscle memory," Rufino muttered. "You never forget survival." Martha hugged herself, the oversized pink dress now dulled by rain and dirt. "Mom said you were dangerous," she said. "She wasn't wrong," he replied, holstering his gun. "But she forgot to tell you who I was dangerous to." The silence after that was long but not empty. Rufino poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her, his movements mechanical but gentle. Martha took a sip, then looked up at him, eyes too old for her face. "You didn't look scared out there," she said. "I've been scared before," he answered. "It doesn't help." "Is that how you survived?" she asked. "No," he said. "I survived because I stopped pretending I could." She tilted her head, trying to understand the contradiction. "Mom said you used to smile." Rufino froze halfway to the shelf. "Did she?" Martha nodded. "She said you smiled like you didn't belong in the dark." He exhaled, a sound almost like a laugh, but carrying the weight of 10 lost years. "Maybe she was right," he said softly, "but the dark has a way of keeping what it likes." A knock came from the outer corridor, soft but deliberate, 2 taps, pause, 1. Rufino drew his pistol again and motioned for Martha to stay put. He approached the steel door, every nerve awake, every shadow suspect. "Who's there?" he called. A voice answered, low but steady. "Luca Moretti, Internal Affairs," it said. "Your mother called me an hour ago." Rufino frowned. "Lucia's not supposed to be talking to anyone." "She wasn't supposed to survive either," the voice replied. The locks released one by one under Rufino's command, and when the door opened, a tall man in a trench coat stepped in, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He carried a folder tucked under one arm and an exhaustion that felt familiar. "You're Rufino Milanesi," he said, stating it like an accusation. Rufino didn't deny it. "And you're either here to arrest me or help me bury a monster." Luca placed the folder on the table, flipping it open to reveal photos, documents, receipts, and surveillance stills of Johnny standing beside luxury cars and government officials. "You were right about him," Luca said. "He's been building his network through your clean fronts for 5 years. Half of the orphanage funding, all the charity money, it went through shell companies linked to offshore accounts." Rufino scanned the photos, his pulse steady despite the rage burning through him. "Who's protecting him?" he asked. "That's the problem," Luca said. "Everyone who should stop him is on his payroll." Martha leaned forward, staring at one of the pictures where her mother appeared in the background. "That's her," she whispered. Luca nodded. "He's been watching both of you for years." Rufino's hand curled into a fist, the sound of his knuckles cracking like a promise. "Then it ends tonight," he said. "Be careful," Luca warned, his tone sharper now. "You think ending him fixes what he built, but he's not working alone. There's someone above him, a senator, maybe more." Rufino looked up, eyes narrowing. "Names?" "None that I can prove," Luca said. "But the pattern fits. He's been funneling kids to private compounds under the guise of protection programs." Martha flinched, her small fingers tightening around the cup. "That's where he was going to take me," she said. Luca glanced at Rufino. "Then she's evidence," he said. "The only living witness who can connect both networks." Rufino's expression hardened, already calculating angles, exits, and contingencies. "Evidence doesn't matter if she's dead," he said. "We need to move her somewhere no one will look." Luca shook his head. "You can't run from this forever." "I'm not running," Rufino replied. "I'm choosing where to make my stand." He led Martha toward the back room, where an old elevator shaft had been converted into a hidden passage. The air smelled of oil and salt, the corridor descending toward the underground docks that once fed his empire. "Where are we going now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "A place where men like him forget how to find light," he said. "The catacombs?" she guessed. Rufino smiled faintly. "Something older." Behind them, Luca followed, his footsteps cautious. "You sure about this?" he asked. "No," Rufino admitted. "But I've been sure before and still ended up in hell." The elevator stopped with a metallic groan, revealing a chamber lined with ancient brick and electric lanterns. "We stay here till sunrise," Rufino said. "After that, we hunt." Martha looked at him, eyes full of stormlight. "You don't mean just him," she said. "You mean everyone who helped him." Rufino nodded once. "Exactly." The catacombs stretched beneath the city like veins carrying the memory of everything buried, but never forgiven. Rufino led the way through narrow tunnels lined with stone archways, his flashlight cutting through the dust and darkness. The walls smelled of damp limestone and age, echoing with the distant drip of unseen water. Martha stayed close to him, her small footsteps almost silent except when they slipped against the uneven floor. Luca followed last, checking behind them every few meters, his hand always near his concealed weapon. "You used this place before?" he asked. Rufino nodded without turning. "Once," he said. "Back when hiding was a strategy, not desperation." The light trembled as they descended deeper, the tunnel widening into a forgotten sanctuary filled with broken pews and melted candles. "You built an empire above ground," Luca muttered. "But your ghosts live down here." Rufino's voice was quiet. "Down here, I can hear them think." They stopped near a circular chamber where the ceiling rose high enough to disappear into shadow. Rufino lit one of the lanterns from the wall, the golden glow revealing mosaics that had once been holy. "We rest here," he said. "No one outside these walls will find us." Martha climbed onto one of the wooden benches, her damp pink dress clinging to her knees. "It feels sad," she whispered. "Like people prayed here and nobody answered." Rufino sat beside her, his back against the cold stone. "Sometimes silence is an answer," he said. She tilted her head. "Did you ever pray?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of what once was warmth. "Once," he said. "For forgiveness." Luca set his bag down near the entrance, scanning the dark corners. "And did you get it?" he asked. "Not yet," Rufino replied. "But I stopped running from the reason I need it." The lantern flickered as the storm above found cracks in the old earth, sending rivulets of rainwater down the walls. Martha shivered and pulled her knees to her chest, her voice barely louder than the echo of droplets. "Do you think Mom's safe?" she asked. Rufino nodded automatically, though the truth gnawed at him. "She's protected," he said. "The hospital's under surveillance." "Johnny found it once," she whispered. "He'll find it again." Luca looked up, his face caught between skepticism and concern. "She's right," he said. "If Johnny's tracking your movements, The hospital's already compromised. Rufino stared into the lantern flame, his reflection fractured across the glass. He won't hurt her, he said finally. Not yet. He needs her alive to prove I'm weak. That's not protection, Martha said softly. That's waiting for pain. Rufino didn't argue, because she had inherited her mother's terrible accuracy with truth. Luca spread the documents across the stone altar that had become their table, the papers catching the light like ghosts demanding to be read. These are financial transfers, he said. Shell companies linked to both you and Johnny, all leading to the same offshore holding account. Rufino leaned forward, scanning the pages. The Cielo Foundation, he muttered. That was supposed to fund rehabilitation centers. It did, Luca replied grimly. But half those centers don't exist. Martha looked between them, her voice uncertain. What happened to the people who went there? Luca hesitated, then answered. Most never came back. Rufino's hands curled into fists, the veins in his forearms rising like lines of guilt. He used my name to build hell, he said. And I signed the papers that let him. Then you expose him, Luca said. Not with bullets, but evidence. Rufino's eyes flicked toward Martha. He won't let us live long enough to testify. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly from the tunnel entrance, soft but deliberate. All three froze, listening. Luca reached for his gun, gesturing for silence, while Rufino grabbed Martha and pulled her behind the bench. The footsteps paused, then continued, growing louder, closer, methodical. A shadow appeared in the corridor, distorted by the flicker of lantern light. If that's one of your men, Luca whispered, he's late. It's not, Rufino said. The silhouette stopped just beyond the chamber's threshold, then a voice spoke, low, female, tired. Don't shoot. Rufino blinked, the voice too familiar to trust his hearing. Lucia, he called. She stepped forward, pale and trembling, her hospital gown hidden beneath a borrowed coat, her breath ragged but real. I told you, she said faintly. I was done running. Rufino was beside her in seconds, his arm steadying her as she nearly collapsed. You shouldn't be here, he said. You shouldn't be alive, she answered, half smiling through exhaustion. Martha ran to her mother, tears breaking loose after hours of fear. You left the hospital, Rufino said, glancing at Luca. How? The nurse owed me a favor, Lucia replied. She said men were coming with fake warrants. I didn't wait to see their faces. Rufino helped her to the bench, his mind racing through security protocols, timelines, possibilities. You led them away, he asked. Or to us. I don't know, she said, her voice cracking. But if they followed, you'll hear them before you see them. Luca moved to the entrance again, flashlight scanning the tunnel. She's right, he muttered. Someone's out there. Rufino pulled his pistol free, chambered around, and met Lucia's eyes. Then we make this place a confession booth, he said. The first shot came without warning, the bullet sparking against stone before echoing through the catacombs. Down! Rufino shouted, shoving Martha to the ground and covering her with his body. Lucia ducked behind the bench, clutching her daughter's hand as dust rained from the ceiling. Luca fired twice toward the tunnel, his aim precise even through the smoke. 2, maybe 3, he shouted. Moving fast. Rufino returned fire, the flashes illuminating the carved saints on the walls, their faces watching like indifferent witnesses. The sound was deafening in the confined space, each shot turning ancient prayers into thunder. Martha pressed her face into her mother's coat, trying not to scream. We have to go, Lucia yelled. Rufino shook his head. Not until I know who they are. Another shot hit the lantern, plunging them into half-darkness and the smell of burning oil. The gunfire slowed, replaced by the sound of retreating boots echoing into silence. Rufino crept toward the tunnel entrance, his breath controlled, his ears tuned for deceit. The beam of his flashlight caught the glint of something metallic, a badge half buried in the dirt. He picked it up, his stomach tightening when he saw the engraving, Internal Affairs, Special Crimes Division. They weren't his men, Rufino said. They were yours, Luca answered grimly. Or they used to be. Lucia sat against the wall, her face pale but steady. Then no one's clean, she murmured. Not the police, not the state, not the families. Rufino turned the badge over in his hand, the edges slick with fresh blood. "Johnny's not hiding anymore," he said. "He's cleaning house." "So, what do we do now?" Martha asked. Rufino looked at her, his eyes calm in the dim. "Now," he said, "we start burning his down. If you're yet to subscribe, kindly do so now for the next part of the story." The smell of gunpowder lingered long after the last echo faded into the tunnel's hollow ribs. Rufino checked each casing on the ground, his movements practiced, efficient, cold. "They didn't aim to kill," he muttered. "They aimed to scare." Luca crouched near the wall, reloading with hands that shook less than the lantern light. "That means he's close," Luca said. "He's watching to see if we run." Lucia wiped blood, not hers, someone else's, from her sleeve, her breathing uneven but controlled. "Then we don't," Rufino said. "We make him come here where he thinks we're cornered." Martha's eyes were wide, but she didn't cry. "He already knows where we are," she whispered. Rufino looked at her, then at the badge still glinting in his hand. "Good," he said softly. "That saves us the trouble of inviting him." Outside, thunder rolled again, and somewhere above ground, the city began to scream with sirens. They sealed the tunnel's main entrance with steel plates scavenged from old crates, the clang of bolts echoing like a countdown. Rufino gave orders in the low, commanding tone of a man who'd done this before. Luca positioned himself behind a pillar, rifle raised, while Lucia guided Martha into the narrow alcove between two stone coffins. "Keep her there," Rufino said. "No matter what happens." Lucia nodded, though her eyes betrayed what her mouth didn't fear, that this time, the past wouldn't let them walk away. "You think he'll come himself?" Luca asked. Rufino holstered his pistol, checking the knife strapped to his thigh. "He's too vain not to," he said. "He wants to look me in the eyes when he wins." The lantern light flickered as wind found cracks above, ghosting through their hair like invisible fingers. "Then he doesn't know what losing feels like yet," Luca replied. "But he will." Minutes stretched into hours that felt like minutes, the silence broken only by the sound of water dripping and Lucia's quiet breathing. Martha sat with her back against the wall, watching her mother trace small circles on her palm. "Mom," she whispered, "did you really love him?" Lucia didn't answer immediately, her eyes fixed on the stone floor as if the truth were carved into it. "I did," she said finally. "And I hated myself for it every day after." Martha frowned. "Why?" Lucia looked toward Rufino's shadow moving across the chamber. "Because loving him meant seeing what I wanted him to be instead of what he was." "And now?" the girl asked. Lucia smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Now I see both," she said. "And somehow that makes it harder." Rufino, listening from across the room, exhaled quietly, as though the words had struck a wound he'd forgotten to close. The radio in Luca's coat pocket crackled to life without warning, a voice slicing through static. "Don Milanesi," it said, smooth and mocking. "Still hiding under the city like a rat that remembers he used to be a lion." Rufino froze, the blood in his veins turning to steel. "Johnny," he said. "I was wondering when you'd call." The laugh that followed was cold enough to chill the stone around them. "You always did like dramatics," Johnny replied. "But this is art." The prodigal father, the dying lover, the orphan girl who doesn't know she's the last chip on the table. Martha's hands clenched into fists, her breathing quickening. "You talk too much," Rufino said. "Maybe," Johnny answered, "but at least I talk to the truth." The radio cut off with a hiss, and the chamber fell silent again. Rufino turned to Luca. "He's tracking our frequency," he said. "That means he's closer than we thought." It happened fast after that, the soft crunch of footsteps above, the echo of metal shifting in the tunnel vents. Rufino motioned for silence, his finger pressed to his lips. "Positions," he whispered. Luca moved to the west corridor, crouched low, weapon raised. Lucia pulled Martha tighter into the alcove, whispering a prayer under her breath. Rufino stood at the center of the chamber, gun drawn, waiting. The sound came again, nearer this time, a heavy tread followed by the creak of an old hatch. "He's here," Rufino murmured. "No more running." The hatch above them opened with a groan, and two figures dropped through the dark, men in tactical gear, faces hidden behind masks. Rufino fired twice, both shots clean, both targets collapsing before they hit the ground. Scouts, Luca said. He's testing the entry points. Then he'll find one that works, Rufino answered. And when he does, we end this. The smell of burnt powder thickened the air, clinging to their skin like sin. Lucia coughed once, covering her mouth with her sleeve. How long can we stay here? She asked. Rufino reloaded, his hands steady. Until he runs out of courage, he said. Luca shook his head. He's not running out of anything. You saw his files, he's got a private army and politicians on payroll. Rufino's expression didn't change. Then we take the only thing he can't buy. Martha looked up. What's that? Fear, Rufino said. Real fear, the kind that makes a man remember he's mortal. Luca gave a low, humorless laugh. You always did have a poetic way of declaring war. It's not poetry, Rufino replied. It's survival written loud enough for the devil to hear it. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the chamber into darkness. The hum of electricity vanished, replaced by the hollow roar of rainwater echoing from unseen cracks. He cut the power, Luca said. He's flushing us out. Rufino's instinct screamed, every nerve remembering the precision of Johnny's traps. Stay low, he barked. A flash of light exploded from the tunnel entrance, a grenade, smoke flooding the air in thick gray waves. The first shot came from the dark, then another, sparks ricocheting off the stone. Rufino fired back, blind but deliberate, listening for the rhythm of footsteps. Lucia, get her down, he shouted. I've got her, she answered. Luca's rifle cracked once, then twice, then silence again. The smoke cleared enough for Rufino to see two more bodies on the floor and a third shadow retreating into the tunnel's mouth. He's pulling back, Luca said between breaths. No, Rufino answered. He's circling. They regrouped quickly, the chaos giving way to grim focus. Rufino checked each corner, counting the seconds between the fading echoes. Lucia pressed a hand to her side, wincing. You're hurt, Rufino said, moving toward her. It's nothing, she lied, blood darkening the fabric of her coat. You need stitches, he insisted. We don't have time, she said. Martha, pale but unshaken, tore a strip from her dress and handed it to him. Here, she said quietly. Rufino nodded once, wrapping it around Lucia's waist with quick, efficient pressure. You've done this before, Luca muttered. Too many times, Rufino said. The bandage tightened, Lucia's breathing steadied, and the air between them changed, less fear, more resolve. He's not expecting us to go after him, Rufino said. Then he's about to be surprised. They moved at dawn, when the storm above had quieted into a gray drizzle that trickled through the cracks. Rufino led the way, lantern in one hand, pistol in the other, following the trail of footprints through the mud-caked corridor. The catacombs gave way to a service tunnel that opened into the underbelly of the old port. He's been here, Luca said, pointing at cigarette butts and tire marks. Then we're close, Rufino answered. Lucia leaned heavily on the wall, every step slower than the last, but she refused help. Martha followed quietly, her eyes fixed ahead like she could see the ending before it came. What happens if we find him? She asked. Rufino didn't hesitate. Then we stop pretending this story has another chapter, he said. The tunnel opened to light, pale, broken, and cold, and beyond it, the faint sound of laughter waiting to be silenced. The tunnel's mouth opened onto the lower docks, where mist and morning light tangled in pale ribbons. Rusted cranes leaned like exhausted giants, their cables swaying in rhythm with the sea's slow breathing. Rufino moved first, gun raised, his boots whispering against wet concrete. Luca flanked him, keeping his distance, but close enough to cover angles. Lucia followed with Martha tucked close, both trying not to draw sound from the stillness. The air smelled of salt and engine oil, the kind of scent that clung to memory like regret. He's close, Luca muttered, scanning the rooftops. He wants you to come out in the open. Rufino's eyes tracked the shoreline, where a row of black vehicles sat half-hidden behind shipping containers. He doesn't want me dead, he said. Not yet. How can you be sure? Lucia asked quietly. Because if he did, Rufino replied, we'd already be ghosts. A seagull's cry cut the silence, followed by the metallic click of a distant safety being switched off. Positions, Rufino hissed. Luca moved left, crouching behind a stack of crates, while Lucia guided Martha into the shelter of a doorway. Rufino advanced, every step a careful conversation with the ground beneath him. The docks stretched out like a chessboard soaked in fog, each shadow a potential betrayal. "You really brought them here," Johnny's voice called from somewhere unseen, smooth and venomous as silk. "A wife, a child, a witness. You never did learn how to separate love from weakness." Rufino's gun tilted slightly toward the sound. "You're the one who learned how to live without either," he said. "And look how well that worked out." The fog shifted, revealing Johnny standing near the edge of the dock, his reflection trembling in the water like a promise that couldn't keep itself. "Careful, brother," Johnny said. "We're standing over the same grave." Luca's finger hovered on the trigger, but Rufino lifted a hand, a silent command to wait. "No more bodies unless they're necessary," Rufino said under his breath. "We end this with truth, not bullets." Johnny laughed, the sound echoing off the steel hulls around them. "Truth? That's rich coming from you. Tell me, have you told the little one why you really walked away from her mother?" Rufino didn't move. "Because I wanted to keep her alive," he said evenly. "No," Johnny said, stepping closer, his smirk cutting through the fog. "Because you made a deal with me. Remember that?" Lucia stiffened, her eyes starting toward Rufino. "What deal?" she whispered. "Don't," Rufino said quietly. "He's lying." Johnny's grin widened. "He never told you about the night you disappeared, did he?" The silence that followed was sharp enough to hurt. "Stop talking," Rufino said, though his voice lacked its usual armor. Johnny ignored him, his words falling like poison. "You came to me begging," he said. "You said you wanted out of the business, out of blood. I told you I could make it happen, but only if she vanished. Only if Lucia and the baby became ghosts." Lucia's breath caught. "That's not true," she said, but doubt cracked through her voice like ice breaking underfoot. Rufino took a step forward, jaw tight. "You twist truth like scripture," he said. "You think I'd trade them for freedom?" "You didn't trade them," Johnny said softly. "You buried them in memory so you wouldn't have to see what your choices cost." Luca aimed again, but Martha tugged his sleeve, shaking her head. "Don't," she whispered. "He's trying to make them fight." Luca hesitated, his rifle lowering a fraction. The fog thickened again, swallowing sound and light until all that was left were heartbeats and ghosts. Lucia took a step out of the doorway, her voice trembling but strong enough to carry. "You want to talk about cost," she shouted. "Then tell me about the girls your men took from those centers. Tell me about the children buried under your money." Johnny tilted his head, his expression almost gentle. "I built an empire that doesn't pretend to be moral," he said. "Can you say the same about him?" Rufino didn't respond, though the shame in his silence spoke louder than words. "That's enough," he said, raising his weapon. "Maybe," Johnny said. "But you always stop halfway, brother. That's your curse." Before Rufino could answer, a shot rang out, not from him, not from Johnny, but from somewhere above. The bullet tore through Johnny's shoulder, spinning him backward with a snarl of pain. Luca looked up, spotting movement on the roof of the nearest crane. "Sniper," he shouted. "Move." Rufino grabbed Lucia and Martha, pulling them toward cover as a second shot cracked through the mist. The docks erupted into chaos, echo and gunfire colliding like waves against iron. Rufino ducked behind a container, returning fire toward the roof. Luca's bullets traced sparks across metal beams, forcing the shooter to retreat. Johnny staggered, clutching his bleeding arm, his smirk replaced by fury. "You brought the cops here," he roared. "Not mine," Rufino shouted back. "You've made more enemies than you think." Another burst of gunfire shredded the fog, cutting through a row of barrels and sending oil spilling across the dock. Lucia shielded Martha with her body as fragments rained around them. "We need to move now," Luca yelled. "South Pier, there's an old trawler." Rufino nodded, reloading as he ran. Johnny stumbled after them, blood marking his path like breadcrumbs for death to follow. "You think you can run from this?" Johnny shouted. "You think you can rewrite what we are?" Rufino didn't look back. "I'm not rewriting," he said. "I'm erasing." They reached the trawler just as the fog began to break, sunlight slicing through like judgment. Rufino climbed aboard first, hauling Martha up by the arm while Lucia and Luca covered from the pier. "Engines still work," Luca said, checking the dash. "Barely, but it'll move." "Then we move," Rufino said. "Johnny's not dying here, he's too stubborn for that." Lucia sat down hard, clutching her side again, blood seeping through the torn bandage. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered to Rufino. "You should have let me disappear." He crouched beside her, meeting her eyes. "I've spent 10 years doing that," he said. "And all it did was make monsters bigger." "Then kill him," she said, her voice brittle. "End it before he finds us again." Rufino looked toward the shore, where the fog thinned enough to show Johnny standing, wounded but still upright, staring after them with a smile that promised more hell. The trawler coughed to life, its old engine growling like an awakened beast. Luca steered them toward open water, the waves rising slow and heavy under the gray sky. "He won't follow by sea," Rufino said, though he didn't sound convinced. "He doesn't need to," Luca replied. "He'll wait for us to surface somewhere else." Martha leaned against the railing, the wind tangling her hair as the city shrank behind them. "Are we free now?" she asked. Rufino looked out across the horizon, the line where the clouds met water. "Freedom's not distance," he said quietly. "It's what we do when we stop running." Lucia closed her eyes, exhaustion overtaking defiance. "Then you'd better start," she murmured. The boat rocked gently, its rhythm almost peaceful, but beneath it, the sea carried the weight of too many secrets. And on the pier, Johnny raised his phone, dialing a number only devils answered. The sea stretched out in every direction, an endless sheet of gray where sky and water seemed to conspire to erase the horizon. The trawler rocked beneath them, its engine coughing as it fought against the wind. Rufino stood near the bow, his coat whipping around him, eyes fixed on the invisible line where freedom pretended to live. Luca adjusted the radio dial, searching for static that wasn't full of ghosts. "Nothing," he muttered. "No signals, no chatter. Either we're clear or completely alone." "Both," Rufino said without turning. "And neither is safe." Martha sat beside Lucia, who lay bundled in an old blanket, her skin pale and lips trembling. "She needs a doctor," Martha whispered. "We can't stop yet," Rufino replied, his voice strained but certain. "He'll expect us to run to safety. That's why we stay at sea." The salt wind stung, but it was better than the silence of dying on land. Lucia stirred, her voice weak but still iron in tone. "You think you can outrun your brother on water?" Rufino crouched beside her, his hands tightening into fists he didn't know how to unclench. "I'm not outrunning him," he said. "I'm giving you a head start." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile people wear when they've already accepted what others won't. "You always did confuse protection with punishment. And you always mistook survival for betrayal," he countered. "You built walls," she said softly. "But walls don't keep death out, they just keep you in." Rufino looked away, unable to face the truth carved into her words. "Then maybe dying in motion is better than living in a cage," he said. Martha's hand found his sleeve, small and certain. "You're not dying," she said. "Not until I say so." The line made Lucia laugh, low and fragile but real, a sound that cut through the sea's cold breath. Luca joined them, holding a map that had begun to disintegrate under the spray. "There's an abandoned oil rig 30 miles east," he said. "Last used 5 years ago, now decommissioned. If we can make it there, we can regroup, refuel, maybe signal a safe contact." Rufino studied the coordinates, his eyes narrowing. "It's off-grid," he said. "Johnny won't expect that." Luca nodded. "But it's risky. The structure's unstable, and the tide around it's unpredictable." "So are we," Rufino said. "Plot the course." Martha leaned over the railing, the horizon trembling before her like something alive. "Will Mom be okay until then?" she asked. Luca hesitated, then nodded. "If she keeps warm, yes." Lucia's eyes flickered open again. "Don't make promises for me," she murmured. "I've already lived longer than men like Johnny ever planned for." Rufino squeezed her hand gently, the storm inside him growing quieter for the first time. By midday, the sky had turned darker, bruised clouds rolling across the waves like an army on the march. The wind picked up, howling through the metal rails of the trawler until even Luca's steady hands began to shake on the wheel. "She's not going to make it through this weather," he shouted. "We'll make her," Rufino said. The rain hit sideways, hard enough to sting, the world dissolving into noise and movement. Martha clung to Lucia, wrapping the blanket tighter around her mother's shivering frame. "You're okay," she whispered. "You promised me you'd see the sun again." Lucia tried to smile, but could only manage a whisper. "If I don't," she said, "make sure he does." Rufino caught the words even through the storm's roar. "You're not saying goodbye," he growled. "I already did once," she said faintly. "I don't need to do it again." The waves rose higher, slamming into the hull like the fists of an angry god. When the storm finally broke, the sea was littered with whitecaps, but the trawler still floated, scarred but unbroken. Luca steered toward the faint shadow rising on the horizon, the silhouette of the oil rig, tall and skeletal against the dying light. "There," he said. "That's our refuge." Rufino watched the structure grow closer, rust eating at its edges, seagulls circling its crown like sentries of ruin. "She'll hold," he said. "She just has to." Martha peeked over the rail, her wide eyes reflecting the towering shape as they approached. "It looks like a castle," she whispered. "One the sea forgot," Lucia murmured, her voice barely audible. Rufino studied the boat as they reached the lower platform, ropes slapping against corroded ladders. "We climb," he said. "Slowly. Martha first, then Lucia." Luca nodded and secured the line. "I'll bring the supplies once they're up." The wind whistled through the steel beams, carrying the ghosts of storms that had never left. The climb felt endless, the metal slick with rain and rust, every step a gamble between strength and gravity. Rufino went last, keeping his hand near Lucia's foot as she struggled upward, Martha already waiting near the top. "Almost there," he said. "Don't look down." Lucia laughed softly, her breath ragged. "You always say that." "Because you never listen," he said. When they reached the main deck, the expanse of corroded steel stretched out before them, streaked with oil and gold droppings, shimmering faintly in the returning light. "This place smells like ghosts," Martha said. "Then it's perfect," Rufino replied. Luca climbed up behind them, tossing a duffel over the rail. No power, no lights, but the central cabin's dry. Rufino nodded, carrying Lucia inside while Martha followed close behind. The room was cold, empty except for a rusted table and a single broken chair. Still, it was shelter, and that was enough for now. They settled in as night fell, the rig creaking under the weight of the tide below. Rufino laid Lucia on the floor, propping her head on folded canvas. "You need rest," he said. "You need peace," she whispered, half smiling. Luca stood by the doorway, rifle resting against his shoulder. "We'll take shifts," he said. "I'll watch first." Martha sat cross-legged beside her mother, her small fingers brushing Lucia's hair. "Will it be morning soon?" she asked. "Always," Lucia said, though the word trembled. Rufino stared out the broken window, where the sea reflected stars like scattered glass. "He's coming," he said quietly. Luca turned. "You're sure?" "Johnny doesn't retreat," Rufino replied. "He waits for weakness to look like mercy." "Then he'll find something else this time," Luca said. "Because this family doesn't break easy." Rufino's answer was a nod, slow and deliberate, like a vow renewed under salt and silence. The attack came just before dawn, announced by the low hum of an approaching engine cutting through the water's stillness. Rufino was already moving before the others woke, grabbing his weapon and signaling Luca. "2 boats," Luca whispered, peering through the scope. 6 men each, maybe more. Rufino's jaw tightened. He's bringing everything he has left. Martha woke to the sound of gunfire, her small gasp swallowed by Lucia's hand covering her mouth. "Stay down," Lucia whispered. Rufino and Luca fired from opposite corners of the deck, muzzle flashes painting the night in bursts of light and terror. The first boat tried to circle the rig, but Rufino's shot hit the engine, sending it spinning in a bloom of smoke. "That's one," he muttered. "Don't celebrate yet," Luca shouted. The second boat rammed the base of the rig, sending a tremor through the floor beneath them. They're boarding, Rufino yelled. Then let them, Luca growled. We're not guests anymore. The fight was close and violent, shadows clashing in the dim light of a dying world. Rufino moved like the ghost of every soldier he'd ever buried, his gun an extension of breath and fury. Luca fought beside him, silent and efficient, his bullets finding purpose in precision. The invaders fell one by one, their bodies swallowed by the Black Sea below. Martha hid behind a steel beam, her eyes wide, her breath locked between fear and awe. Lucia tried to sit up, pain racking her body, but she refused to look away. He's here, she said suddenly. Rufino froze mid-step, turning toward the stairwell. Johnny emerged from the smoke, his arms still bandaged, his smile sharper than the blade in his hand. You never could die quietly, Rufino said. And you never could kill fast enough, Johnny replied. The brothers faced each other one last time, the sea below roaring like it wanted to witness the end. The wind screamed through the steel ribs of the rig as the brothers circled each other, two storms sharing one sky. Rufino's gun was empty now, holstered useless at his side, but the knife in his hand gleamed with intent. Johnny moved with a predator's grace despite the wound at his shoulder, the blade in his own hand curved and deliberate. You could have stayed quiet, Johnny said, his voice nearly lost under the surf. You could have kept your throne and pretended innocence. Rufino's answer came like gravel ground into stone. I stopped pretending the day you used my name to hide monsters. They lunged at the same time, the clash of knives ringing like bells in a dead cathedral. Johnny slashed first, grazing Rufino's ribs, the cut shallow but stinging. Rufino countered, twisting Johnny's wrist and driving his fist into his brother's jaw. You always were better with words than hands, he said. Johnny spat blood, smiling through it. Then I'll use both to bury you. Luca fired another round from the catwalk, picking off the last of Johnny's mercenaries as they tried to climb the ladder. We're clear up top, he called, though his voice shook. For now. Rufino barely heard him. The fight had collapsed into chaos and breathing. Johnny swung wide, forcing Rufino backward against the railing. You can't save them, Johnny hissed. Lucia's dying, and the child will forget your name before sunrise. You don't get to say her name, Rufino growled, twisting free. Their knives locked again, steel grinding on steel, sparks falling like fireflies. You never understood, Rufino said, forcing Johnny down to one knee. This was never about power, it was about the choice you were too afraid to make. And what choice is that? Johnny grunted, blood dripping from his mouth. To love something enough to lose it, Rufino said. He shoved hard, sending Johnny's knife clattering across the deck and into the dark water below. For a heartbeat, everything stopped: the wind, the sea, even the noise of battle fading into the hollow rhythm of blood. Johnny knelt before him, chest heaving, defiance still burning behind his eyes. Do it, Johnny said. End it like a true Milanesi. Rufino raised the knife, the muscles in his arm trembling with everything unsaid. You don't get redemption from death, he said. You get it from memory. Johnny sneered. Then remember this. He reached into his coat, revealing a small detonator clutched in his palm. Luca's shout came too late. Rufino tackled him just as Johnny pressed the switch. The explosion roared beneath them, a burst of flame and air that split the rig's lower deck apart. The blast threw them both against the railing, the world erupting into smoke, fire, and shrapnel. Rufino's knife flew from his hand as the structure groaned, one leg of the rig collapsing into the sea. Martha screamed, the sound ripping through the chaos as steel beams shattered around her. Mom, she cried, crawling toward Lucia, who had been thrown against the wall. Lucia's eyes fluttered open, dazed but alive, the air thick with smoke. Martha, listen to me, she gasped. Find him. Don't let him sink. Luca dragged himself to the control cabin, coughing through the fire and seawater. Rufino, he shouted into the smoke, scanning the wreckage below. The lower platform was half submerged, the water foaming red and gray. Then he saw it, two figures locked together near the edge, one pulling the other from the broken railing. Rufino surfaced, gasping, his arm hooked under Johnny's limp body. You should have stayed down, Luca shouted. Rufino coughed seawater and blood, hauling his brother onto the steel. I told him redemption was memory, he said hoarsely. Now he gets to drown with both. They dragged Johnny's unconscious body onto the deck, his chest barely rising, his hand still clutching the broken detonator. He's still alive, Luca said, half astonished, half horrified. Barely, Rufino replied. Martha knelt beside him, eyes wide but not afraid. Are you going to kill him? She asked. Rufino looked at her, then at Lucia, whose hand was pressed against her side, blood seeping through her fingers. No, Rufino said softly. That's not justice. That's inheritance. Johnny's eyes flickered open, unfocused. You think you've won, he rasped. But you built this world, brother. You built me. Rufino stood, the knife dangling loosely at his side. Then I'll rebuild it without you. He turned away, leaving Johnny lying where the tide could choose his fate. Luca looked at him. What if he lives? Then he gets to wake up in the world he tried to destroy, Rufino answered. That's punishment enough. They gathered in the control room as dawn bled across the sea, the fire below dimming to smoke and steam. The rig was collapsing slowly, one section sinking inch by inch beneath the waves. We have to go, Luca said, checking the last rescue raft. We'll never hold until nightfall. Rufino nodded, lifting Lucia carefully. Help me get her on board. Martha held onto her mother's hand as they crossed the buckling platform, her small frame shaking, but steady. It's okay, Lucia whispered. We're almost home. Rufino looked back once, the rig burning, Johnny's figure still motionless on the lower deck. He won't follow, Luca said quietly. He can't, Rufino replied. They climbed aboard the raft, pushing away from the wreck just as the final beam snapped. The oil rig groaned like an old god dying, then folded into the sea, leaving only smoke, salt, and the faint echo of thunder. Hours passed before land appeared, a thin strip of gray on the edge of exhaustion. The raft drifted toward it, guided by the tide and what little hope remained. Rufino rowed until his arms ached, each pull of the oar another confession he couldn't speak aloud. Lucia drifted in and out of consciousness, her pulse faint but stubborn. Martha leaned against her, whispering stories of what they'd do when they reached the shore. We'll find a house with windows that stay open, she said. And a garden. And no more guns, Lucia murmured. Only sunlight. Rufino's voice cracked as he spoke. I'll make sure of it. Luca, bleeding from a cut on his temple, looked back at the open sea. He's gone, he said finally. Rufino didn't answer. His eyes were on the horizon where the smoke still touched the clouds, marking both an ending and a warning. They reached the coastline by dusk, the surf warm against their legs as they pulled the raft onto the sand. The world was quiet now, too quiet, like the sea itself was holding its breath. Rufino carried Lucia to the dunes, laying her gently on the grass. Stay with me, he said, his voice shaking. I'm here, she whispered. I just wish I'd seen what you became before I left. You still can, he said. You're here now. Martha sat beside her, holding her hand tightly, refusing to cry. Mom, look, she said, pointing at the horizon. The sun's back. Lucia smiled, the smallest, truest smile he'd ever seen. I told you, she said faintly. It always comes back. Her hand went still, and the wind moved through her hair like a benediction. Rufino closed his eyes, his daughter's sobs blending with the tide's eternal rhythm. The funeral was held 3 days later in a small coastal chapel overlooking the sea. Only 4 people attended: Rufino, Martha, Luca, and the priest who didn't ask for names. The air was thick with salt and silence, the kind that remembers everything but forgives nothing. Rufino placed a single lily on the coffin, its petals bruised by wind. You gave me a reason, he whispered. Now I'll give her a world. Martha stood beside him, holding his hand, her face streaked with quiet resolve. Are we safe now? She asked. He looked at her, his voice steady but tired. Safe isn't something you find, he said. It's something you build. Luca lit a candle, the flame flickering against the gray sky. Then let's start building, he said. And as they stepped out into the wind, Rufino looked toward the horizon where the smoke had faded and whispered, for her. Thank you for listening to the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Plus, there's another story on your left screen that you'd like.